Okay, I think we'll make a start so we can keep on time schedule. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Manufacturing Chemist live stream here. I'm Steve Facer. I'm Vice President for Business Development at Adair Pharmaceuticals. Adair is a mid-size contract development and manufacturing organisation, mainly developing and manufacturing all solid dosage forms. So today we have an interesting stream, really focusing on, I would say, three main areas, looking at innovation, sustainability and digitalisation. I would say were the main themes, so that rolls over nicely from yesterday. Just some housekeeping, fire exits are on this level, toilets are on the lower floor as you go back out, refreshments are going to be served pretty much throughout the day. We have two presentations in this room, and then we have a coffee break. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome JP Sherlock, who's AstraZeneca's Head of Innovative Manufacturing Technology. So look forward to an interesting presentation from JP. Thank you.
Great. No problem. Thank you very much, and delighted to be here this morning. Thank you for the invitation to talk. So my name is JP Sherlock. I head up Innovative Manufacturing Technology in AstraZeneca. Just a little bit about me. So I am a chemical engineer by background. I've worked for AstraZeneca for 25 years, various roles, starting out with kind of your core chemical engineering, moving into sort of leadership positions, heading up technical functions in the development space. And a kind of common theme through all of that was really bringing forward or investigating manufacturing technologies. And I would say I had 20 frustrating years, really, within the pharmaceutical industry of trying to push new and innovative and advanced manufacturing approaches. And the last 5 years have been incredibly entertaining and very busy. So much of this talk is actually starting to share with you what's happened to make that change, why things have started to move in this space, and some of the progress that we've been making. So as I say, I'll briefly introduce AstraZeneca. You know, I'm sure some of you are now aware of the name. Probably 5 years ago or pre-pandemic, you wouldn't necessarily have known about AstraZeneca, but now more of a household name. But I can share a bit about AstraZeneca. Certainly then move on to what we see when we look forwards, and it was interesting to kind of highlight those themes. I think they're all wrapped up in what I'm going to talk about: digitalisation, sustainability, manufacturing technology platforms, and then move into specifically, two areas where we're really making significant progress to establish new manufacturing platforms. And then wrap up really with some of the real drivers and enablers of that change, recognising that this is more of a change project than a technology project, to introduce these aspects. So firstly then, AstraZeneca at a glance, and we're really delivering now upon our vision. We are a science and innovation-led organisation, and I think that innovation piece is absolutely critical against a backdrop of a rapidly changing world. So science is at the core of everything we do, not just in the R&D portfolio, but across our commercial organisations and across our operations. We are focused on leading in the therapy areas that are going to make a meaningful difference to patients. So for us, that's oncology, and oncology has been a significantly increasing part of our business, and that has a major impact on the type of work that we do. But also rare diseases, cardiovascular, renal metabolism, respiratory and immunology, all target areas for us. And it's that balance of sort of primary care, specialty care and rare diseases that really allows us to lead in those different therapy areas by having that mix. We do have a focus on patient-centric, and I know many companies will talk to that. I certainly see that day to day in all of our activities. And it's that diversified portfolio that we have across those areas that allows us to have that patient-centric approach. We're a global company, truly global company, and leading in a number of markets, particularly those in the emerging markets particularly. And finally, I think we've been very public about this, we're committed to operating in a way that recognises that interconnection between business growth, the needs of society, and the limitations of our planet, and been very, I say, very visible in our journey towards net zero and beyond. 2022 was a year of continued good, strong performance, and obviously lots of figures there, but some of the ones I'll highlight just based on what I've just been talking to. We had significant progress of our pipeline, and you'll see that the 198 market launches, the 34 regulatory approvals and authorisations, that supported delivery of 14 blockbusters during the year. So in terms of the size and scale of those products. So even though I think one of the immediate reflections or one of the immediate takeaways is whilst we're still seeing blockbuster drugs, the volumes associated with those blockbusters is significantly reduced. So one of the major themes that you'll already start to see is that move for commercial volumes to be much lower in our products and to deliver that blockbuster level. We did invest $9.8 billion in science. Obviously, large pharmas it's often the profits that are being talked about, but effectively $9.8 billion of that reinvested in the business to discover new medicines and progress those through the portfolio. With those medicines, we are also bringing forward new technology platforms, whether it's the platforms associated with advanced drug conjugates or actually manufacturing technologies. So we do look across that portfolio and use that through R&D. Any other takeaways from this slide? No, I think I'll move on. So that's kind of where we are now, and certainly for AstraZeneca there's been a significant period of real growth. The original target when Pascal came in as CEO was to return to growth. We've done that and more. That $44 billion revenue target that was met, that significantly exceeds where we thought we would, or where people thought we might be when the Pfizer takeover was initially mooted, and very much close to the $50 billion target that we effectively set ourselves. So for 2025. So we're well on track for that. But we've gone beyond that now to start to look towards 2030 and what 2030 would mean for us. And you go to the last bit, so we expect to launch at least 15 new medicines. So that's not an inconsiderable target. 15 new medicines, be carbon negative, and make an even bigger difference for people, society, and the planet. And I think in terms of ambition level, that certainly says a lot. And that kind of ambition and that target really drives a lot of what we then look at in terms of how the business has to respond and how the strategy develops accordingly. So in operations, our recognition is how we've done things in the past and how we've delivered. And operations has delivered, global operations in AstraZeneca. In terms of the quality, we've had no recalls, we've had no NTs, the basic levels of supply chain and supply delivery that you would look at in the company, we've absolutely knocked it out of the park, and really are very proud to be part of an operation organisation that does that. But as this slide says, the world around us is changing rapidly, and really just pointing to kind of 4 areas where we see really quite significant, maybe monumental changes in that are going to have, by 2030, a really significant impact on the way we manufacture, the way we supply, the way we design our supply chains. So firstly then in science and technology, and I'll expand upon this a bit more in a moment, but the new modalities and complex portfolio are having a real impact on what we have to make. We aren't limiting ourselves now to a small molecule or a large molecule. But as we pursue those areas of unmet medical need, we're having to use different approaches and go into different molecule types, and really that modality mix isn't limited. So it's not some companies are saying, oh, we're only going to go after the advanced drug conjugates. Others are going to say we only go over PROTACs. AstraZeneca approaches, it doesn't matter. We'll do whatever it means to get to a good medicine and a target. Obviously, my main area of interest is those production technologies, and specifically why those production technologies are the answer to some of the challenges that we are faced with. So introducing those production technologies and the change associated with those. And then if that wasn't enough, we're having to do it faster. So not only are we seeing particularly in the oncology space, what we tend to see, or have an opportunity to exploit, should I say, is the fact you can get very clear signals of efficacy in phase 1. We dose to patient populations. If we see signals in phase 1, we can move to market very, very quickly. And that's regulatory change that's enabled us to do that. So we can actually either move directly to phase 3 studies, or we can go through phase 2 and register on the back of a phase 2. So you're taking out potentially a whole chunk of clinical development. So in oncology particularly, but starting and increasingly in other areas as well, we're really starting to see that shortening of development lead times. And this is in an industry where typically your CMC development group, your chemistry and manufacturing controls group, would always have the buffer of clinical development, i.e., doesn't matter if we're late, clinical will be later. Pretty much how it used to run. No longer the case. Very real challenge that CMC would be on critical path to launch. So increasing complexity, new production technologies, reduce speed, and actually, as you say, 15 new medicines by 2030, that actually means we're probably working on more molecules than we ever have. So that's, firstly, one of the challenges. Next, if you look at global and societal, the healthcare systems are under real pressure. We have an aging population, increasing prevalence of chronic disease, long-lasting disease. So, oversimplistically, one of the areas they target is the cost of medicines. If you looked at, from my personal perspective, if you look at cost of, outcome-based reimbursement, and we're able to actually look at the benefits associated with the medicines, you may well have a different way of looking at it. But simplistically, money is spent on medicines. How do we drive down the cost? So COGS is an issue. It's even more of an issue when you start to look at our complex new modalities. Regulators, again, changing regulatory landscape, increased expectation in terms of quality and what's been allowed, but also opportunities. So increased harmonization across markets, which certainly presents a great opportunity for us. And the opportunities, as I said before, really for those breakthrough designations, those early registrations associated with the science-led approach. And then finally, the expectation of sustainability. So I think we heard a bit about it yesterday. For those of you that are here, there are going to be markets that actually have an expectation of net zero compliance associated with your medicine. So going beyond safety, efficacy, differentiated, may well also incorporate sustainability as an aspect of new medicines registration. So we have to be ready for that. Then just quickly on patient expectations, digital data, AI and tech. Patient-centric product design, I'll focus on that. Many of the new modalities come forward as parenteral presentations, opportunities within those devices and everything associated with those to be much more patient-centric in the product design. It doesn't just go to devices, it could be in pack, and it could be in the way that information is shared with those patients. So looking at that, also the increased agility, flexibility within our supply chains, really understanding what that last mile to patient actually means. So really starting to build in and maybe change the way that our supply chains are structured. And I don't think you could have a presentation now if you didn't talk to digital, and it is a key enabler. And I think the way to look at digital is being that enabler. I think there are things that we would have liked to have done previously that we couldn't do that are now made possible as a consequence of that convergence of technology and data, digital, allowing us to effectively get greater insights and decision making. So going back to the new modalities piece, I like this slide because it's got lots of whizzy bits on it, but effectively, this is some of the complexity that we're seeing within the pipeline across our large and small molecules. And you can no longer divide it as large and small. We're talking about antibody drug conjugates, where you're actually putting drug linker connected to a biologic. We've got cell-based therapeutics, and lots about cell and gene therapy, peptides and nucleotides. And really just to call out one of those that we're doing a lot of work on at the moment, oligonucleotides. We have a very satisfactory way of manufacturing oligonucleotides if you want to make kilos, as in tens of kilos or 20s, 50s of kilos. As soon as you start to get up to hundreds of kilos, 200 kilos, as a commercial volume, then your solid phase synthesis starts to run into real challenges. Not making it, but just the length of time it takes to make it, and therefore the cost associated with making it, the amount of solvent it uses. Effectively, oligonucleotides use acetonitrile, and we would use significant percentages of the amount of acetonitrile available if you were going to start to make oligonucleotides to that scale. And therefore, there's an environmental impact as well as supplier impact. So realistically, solid phase synthesis has its place, but we need a better approach. And oligonucleotides aren't new. They've existed, and the science of making them has existed for some time. But the demand from effectively pharma and commercial manufacturing to deliver these is saying we need to do something new and different. And you'll have different examples. So I've seen examples of technologies that make use of continuous manufacturing to try to address the concerns. We're currently running a collaborative project with the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, Novartis, Alnylam, to effectively develop a solution-based approach to oligonucleotide manufacture that should shorten lead times, reduce solvent use, and ultimately give us greater flexibility in supply. And if you look at that from an operations perspective, what you see is a really diverse portfolio and growing complexity. And we need differentiated supply chains. So at one end, we're still looking at small molecules, OSD formulations, significant sort of focus on cash flow rather than patient, and how do we manage that? High volume, low value. We've still got a lot of that within our portfolio. We may well still have a lot of that in the portfolio come 2030. However, increasingly what we'll see is that low volume, high value. And all of those levers that you did have associated with volume start to become less impactful. So how do you effectively start to change your supply chain to allow you to respond to that more patient-centric, low volume, high value, demand-driven pull type market? So real shift within the supply chain. So if I try and summarize that kind of introduction, and that was just the introduction, so what you're seeing are a number of challenges. So speed, complexity, cost and agility. The driver on all of those things is ramped up significantly. But the good news is I think there's a real opportunity for us based on innovative manufacturing technologies, and that's in its broadest sense. Not just the platforms, and I'll go on to talk about the platforms in a minute, how we use data and the digitalisation of that data and the digital transformation that we're on. And the pull as a consequence of needing that human centricity, resilience and sustainability at the core of what we do. So I think previously when you've tried to create change within a very conservative and regulated environment, that's hard. That was 15, 20 years of career worth of hard, of trying to push these things. Now, the pull is starting to emerge because it says we need to deliver for patients, we need to deliver for the planet, we need to deliver for society. So how can we be different? How can we do something different? So what are we doing in AstraZeneca then? We've got a number of pipeline activities around technologies. That's part of what my group leads. But the major programs that we've actually got in flight at the moment are to install a continuous API manufacturing capability for development in Macclesfield. This is a long time coming. I think we've talked to and we've developed in the lab a number of continuous processes, but now we're actually able to drive this ourselves, and there's no replacement, no substitute for actually doing this work and driving it. And I think that's where effectively where your major pharma really need to take a role in driving new technologies and new platforms. That can't be something we rely on a CDMO or third party to do on our behalf. They've got a different business model. If we want to reshape manufacturing, it needs to start with the pharma companies. So continuous API, continuous direct compression. We've actually got a suite in Yartuna for commercial. We've already established a capability in development in Gothenburg in Sweden. We have something called a large-scale spray dryer. This is a very innovative spray drying platform. People think about spray drying and obviously equipment the size of this room that effectively used for spray drying. It's not a new technology, but this uses high pressure nozzle design and a hopper system to effectively really collapse and intensify that capability. In terms of a big project and that's been in the news a fair amount is the API commercialization facility that we are building in Dublin. And then finally, we're still looking at next generation biologics. So again, intensification, integration of multiple steps, and that's a common theme, I would say, across these platforms, is the intensification of unit operations, the integration of unit operations. We use continuous as a term, probably too much. What we're really doing is looking at the duties of those unit operations and looking at how we can intensify the operation and integrate those operations, ultimately taking out waste from the system. The other major program that we've got ongoing, so this is an area I lead, and simplistically you can divide it into hardware and software. So the hardware side of things is this bit, the software is the smart factory. And I think probably one of the challenges is actually, the fact that these are separated organisationally, but what we're doing is really kind of pulling those things together across the organisation. So making sure they're integrated, because one takeaway you should have is much of our digital transformation and really driving those down to a process level cannot be done unless we transform what we're doing in our manufacturing processes. And similarly, our manufacturing processes highly dependent on the digital and data transformation as well. So this is a symbiotic, integrated approach that needs to be taken to really drive towards truly smart factories and enable us to deliver on the benefits and value associated with that. I think there was some conversation yesterday about process analytical technology, for example, and why it wasn't implemented. From my perspective, at least, the truth is that PAT has limited value in a batch world. It provides a little bit of insight, may well help you understand the process, but it's an add-on, and as such, it becomes a cost, and you have to really drive the value of it. For a continuous process or an intensified process, it is impossible to run that process without PAT. You have to have the right control, measurement and control in place to be able to run that continuous process. And the knock-on is real-time release is just an obvious next step. It's not something that you kind of really think about. You go, well, actually, I'm running at shorter lead times. I've got all my control. I've got the quality built in. Why wouldn't I go for real-time release? So there's a few things that start to line up that really help you with this. So try and pick up the speed a bit. So we talk about technology, and this is a technology talk, but my learning and the approach that we take within my organisation is to implement that technology, you have to think all the way around it. Yes, you need robust technical development, right? So we need to have capability that goes into our pipeline, the way that we're developing these drugs, and it needs to work. You can't add a whole load of risk onto your pipeline delivery to bring these platforms forward. So how much can you actually do parallel to and offline or ahead of to really de-risk the capability? Talked about enhanced control, validation, stability, regulatory strategies. They all need to be in place. We need to kind of think about how those things are going to be achieved. The responsive manufacturing capability. So again, can't be waiting around, delaying a project by putting the capability in place. So these things need to be built ahead of the need. Quality infrastructure, business processes. Sometimes the technology isn't the failing, it's the fact that your business processes aren't lined up to it. So not only are we looking at a capital project, say, to put a facility in place, you're starting to look at how do we have to adapt business processes to make sure that we're supporting that project. And integration with the wider business initiatives, and I talked about our smart factory integration. So if I start first with continuous API manufacturing, probably the kind of longest lived, hottest topic ever. It's kind of been talked about for decades. And in certain industries, and certainly I started my industry, was a continuous API manufacturing. The big difference when we talk about continuous now is that it's not about volume and doing it from a kind of efficiency of scale effectively. It's actually the other way. The fact that we're seeing lower volumes allows us to use the same kit in development as we're going to use in commercial. So we miss out TT, we miss out technology transfer, we miss out scale up, we miss out those things. So the opportunity with continuous is much more of that efficiency of transition through development into commercial. But not only that, And I think this is really important. So particularly if you start to look for sustainability and carbon reduction, we can access new chemical space. We don't need 7 kind of steps to get around a loop or a particularly hazardous chemistry. We can go directly. You know, so starting to look at different chemical transformations in order for us to get through to reduce manufacturing time and cost. And you'll see some figures there of examples that we've had, how it's reduced time on plant, how it's driven yield, how it's reduced impurities. That's by accessing the right chemistry and being able to deliver the right chemistry as a consequence of the technology that we've got. It's an enabler for sustainability. So really looking, again, through the right chemistry, but then really putting a green chemistry angle on that, starting to see how we can transform what we're doing. And I say one of the projects that we applied this to, the CO2 savings were equivalent to 70% of the AZ UK heat footprint. So really significant impacts when you start to take this up to commercial manufacturing. And then finally, the make versus buy, and I mentioned the fact that we were heavily dependent on third parties to do this. So when we started to say, okay, let's have an internal capability, a major aspect of that was us being able to really use the technology we wanted to use and effectively start the change program, because you don't have to put too many barriers in place for your development organisation to go, we're just going to go with what we've always done. So the minute you start to take away those barriers, and having an internal capability is a key part of that, allows you to move forwards. Now I'm going to start talking about platforms. And platforms are a really important element of our manufacturing technology approach here. So if we had to go with, create effectively a new process and a new technology for every time that an API comes forward, and what you will get, I don't know how many chemists there are versus engineers in the audience, but what you will get from chemists is all APIs are different. They're all different, and all of the processes are different, and you can't standardize on different things. We're starting to. There's a long way still to go, but we're absolutely starting to, and this is where we've focused our attention, as it shows here. So fast and controlled, high temperature, hazardous. Your obvious go-to continuous steps. This is where you would typically go. Also moving across into sort of liquid extraction, much more efficient approaches than you can do in batch. So these are all kind of the first place you go, but the thing is here, you can say for a particular transformation, it becomes standardized. Now you might have to tweak things a little bit depending on types of chemistry, but for a particular transformation, you can get a standard approach, the manufacturing technology standard, and we're able to really look at that. And now what we're doing is when we have that step identified, we look either side of that step to see if we can push the continuous envelope a bit further. Objective is to effectively get three steps transitioned into continuous, because that starts to have a big impact on process flows. Obviously, there are some barriers, and we're looking at those: solid reagents, precipitate formation, and slow reactions. But again, is it a case of transitioning from batch to continuous, or do we actually start to design from a continuous perspective from day one? And does that drive different behaviours, which actually mean solid reagents and things just start to move out? A key aspect then, as you think about the continuous platform, is modularity. As I say, all APIs are different, so we need some way of, I guess, moving to a more flexible engineering solution than and something that's akin to effectively our batch reactors, where you can pretty much throw everything in and stir it and it's all fine. We need that modularity is key. So we build a backbone structure. So we're working with a supplier called Zeton. They've been, there's a number of pharma companies that have done this, but effectively we're taking that modularity to another level with the work that we're doing now. So we have a backbone into which all the utilities installed. We have a bookcase, which then allows us to plug the modules in, and then the chemistry equipment gets plugged into the modules. So we're able to kind of plug in, plug out different modules. There's effectively a control brain associated with those modules that allows us to effectively really enable that plug and play. This isn't the actual build yet. This happens by the end of this year, but this is computer generated a model of what we're going to see, and this is a retrofit into an existing facility. Like all good development programs, you start with a limited amount of cash and go from there. So real opportunity to have this in place. And I think just quickly talking through the model for modular platforms, how we want to look at it. We talk about unlocked and locked, and this leads us into the tech transfer piece. So what we anticipate being able to do within a technical development space is really have that flexibility, so we can start to move modules in and out based on an asset requirement, so based on the requirements of that process. If that process were then to die, we could effectively use all those modules again in a different approach. When that process moves to commercial, we effectively lock it. So we can lock that those sequences. We can transfer those modules in that setup, or we could just purchase new versus where we are. So that unlocked model for how we effectively transition equipment and processes. And technology transfer is a big deal. Now, it kind of maybe sounds simplistic, but taking a process and moving it into a new manufacturing asset, new manufacturing location, lots of time, lots of effort, lots of risk associated with doing that. We're now looking at effectively being able to simplify that significantly through the use of equipment that we've got. So what we're doing is obviously building that Macclesfield capability, also building the API facility in College Park in Dublin. Significant new investment. This re-establishes commercial API manufacturing within AstraZeneca, something that effectively strategy shifted out probably over a decade ago. So re-establishing it, very focused on commercialization. That's the critical period where we move from development through launch into early commercial supply. So, and bringing all of this together. So it's a smart factory by design, digitalized data flows, control systems, incorporating continuous and batch manufacturing all in one one specific factory. So that's API. So we're moving API significantly forwards in terms of the technologies. Switching to OSD, oral solid dosage form, so making of tablets. We're further along on this journey. Effectively, the establishment of continuous direct compression. Anyone from GEA in the room? Good to see you. So you have some reference here. So in terms of batch manufacturing, how we typically did things, we were moving from wet to dry, but it was still wet granulation moving to roller compaction, still operated in a batch approach. Interestingly, and the big difference here is that platform is absolutely king in this space. We used platforms before, it was roller compaction. We ran those, what were semi-continuous operations, as batch operations. So switching to continuous doesn't have the same challenge, but there are definitely challenges associated with it. And the opportunity with direct compression is it's the simplest of all those OSD platforms. So from a control perspective, it makes sense for DC to be your continuous manufacturer. Just calling out some of the specifics as to why we're doing this. So the flexible batch size is a big one. I think you heard about, there was a talk yesterday that referenced that. So responding to the volatility that we see within commercial supply, we're now able to dial down effectively batch size and be much more responsive in the way that we are able to deliver. It is a mature technology, certainly in the eyes of the regulators. So I think FDA have transitioned into that space. For us, it's still very much new, and we're still looking to prove it. And that's really why this continues to be effectively a new technology for us. A significant reduction in footprint, so when we start to think about scaling this out across the network, we don't have to think about the size of the factories that we're building. So, and I think a big one is this digital-enabled factories. And I talked before about how the manufacturing technology has to enable that digital application. And I'll talk a bit more about the symbiosis and the interactions between those as I go forward. But it's not just about the capital investment, it's about the capabilities and the culture, and about reinforcing these changes. And across all of these, effectively, we're seeing change required. So the quality evaluation during the run rather than after, online analytical technology rather than offline, significant uplift in modelling and simulation capability. You need to know, again, as an engineer, my perspective generally is if you can't model it, you don't understand it. And what we're seeing now is that kind of upfront requirement before you start to move to manufacture. And that's a big change. Yeah. So process disruption affects only part of the batch. Basically, if anything goes awry, you've got an opportunity to stop it, so your potential for waste is much more reduced. Whereas if something goes awry, you potentially the whole batch goes down. And integration. So where are we? So we've implemented for development and clinical manufacture. This is the unit, the Consigma CDC 50, that's been installed in Gothenburg. Shows you how the integration of the different units between continuous, tablet press, and then ultimately coater are possible. We haven't got coater in place for in development spaces yet. So we've customized it. So in development space, in technical space, 2 standalone units, NIR probe between the blenders, smaller tablet press. But in essence, when you go to the larger scale, the commercial unit in Yartuna, it's identical. Excuse me. We're installing that and qualifying it by the end of this year. It's on site at the moment and going through tests and looking to have our first CDC project submitted to the FDA in 2024. That's all lined up. We've had the discussions with the emerging technologies team. Very much an established approach. And as I say, replication of the platform between development and commercial is a significant opportunity. We've got the same control system for both units. Well, the changes are that we've got a higher capacity tablet press, and we've reduced the need for PAT, so we've got a single NIR. In the future, some of the things we're really looking at in terms of the technology are developing the monitoring control tools. We'll do those in the development line first and transition those onto commercial, and allow us to kind of really increase the approach that we're taking with the commercial line. I said that a key part of the digital and hardware approaches have to be integrated, and we've got a concept that we're calling digital blueprint within AstraZeneca, where our smart factory, effectively it's an ISO 95 type structure, and your kind of your IT, OT interface is a real focus for us. But effectively looking at the integration of these different systems to create a blueprint which allows the data to flow as it needs to and the right decisions to be made. So we've successfully put that in place, and that helps us just in terms of operation. I think in the future, what we're really looking at is how can that model start to, that digital twin, and again, a term that's used frequently in talks such as this, where we say, okay, we have got a model-based, science-based understanding of our process, which allows us then to be more predictive in our control approaches. So we do have a digital twin for our continuous direct compression. I'm not expecting you to read this, right? So, but it basically says we've had models in the blending, in the feeding, and in the approach tableting and all the way through. And we've connected those models to create an end-to-end digital twin. And actually going beyond that, some of the collaborative work that we're doing is to really take that through almost to to product properties. So understanding of kind of hardness predicted through this. What does that mean in terms of biopharma properties, dissolution performance, etc.? So really looking at that model from materials through to effect. GPROMs we've used as our platform for modelling and simulation. What have we been able to do with that? I'm just going to call out the bullets at the bottom, basically. So we've seen a 12-month lead time reduction for establishment of CDC, going to, again, our ability to model and predict ahead of manufacturing. So that's really helped us kind of pull in that lead time. Save money on API. API is an incredibly precious commodity in development. It's the value of it, how quickly, how you use it, how much you need for development. So anything you can reduce in terms of its use has a significant cost benefit. And if you look at it from a sustainability perspective, 6 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent saved on reduced technical trials because of that modelling and simulation. So digital modelling, real impact on the way that we do development. And I think we can start to see transformation, movement away from simply trying things out and experimenting and scaling to use of models and doing virtual experimentation and data. Right, I'm almost there. So in terms of where we are with continuous OSD, so we've had successful process qualification. really some interesting kind of little nuggets, if you like. We had 2 seconds between deviating NIR spectrum was measured and tablets were diverted in terms of the control response to seeing out-of-spec materials. We had validation complete, and we've got clinical manufacturers later this year. Our first continuous drug product has been manufactured. Technical run first, resulting in compliant tablets. We've implemented engineering improvements, and we've got 2 successful clinical manufacturers. And we are working on our first in-house CDC project. So achieved throughput of 480,000 tablets per hour, had the NIR monitoring and demonstrated stability. That's what that plot is in the top corner. And the modelling confirmed, again, the feeder performance, delivering compliant tablets. So that model to operation really demonstrating that. So 2 quick, probably not so quick, case studies on what we're doing around manufacturing platforms. And then I said I was going to talk to some of the enablers for change and really kind of emphasise these as we come to sort of conclude. So sustainability, by 2030, we aim to halve our entire value chain footprint, scope 3, become a science-based net zero by 2045. That's an incredible challenge. And anyone who started to look at the reduction that's needed for scope 3 realised that there needs to be real transformation in the way that we put our medicines together. And I think innovative manufacturing technologies are part of that, but it's the processes that they enable that are probably the bigger aspect. Smart factory, I've kind of highlighted where we are on a journey with our digital transformation. This isn't just at a process level, it's all the way through in terms of our supply chain, so digital design, development, digital manufacturing, digital supply, enabling digital across our entire supply chain. I'm going to spend a bit of time before I finish on collaboration and how important it is, not just internal collaboration. I mentioned that we've got the interaction between our hardware, software, the symbiotic relationship between our equipment and IT and digital, but actually outside and external and pre-competitive collaboration as a whole, really, really valuable. And then I don't think you can talk about change without reference to skills and capability. And there's a huge focus in AstraZeneca around the creation of a strong talent base and pipeline. Fortunate position of being a growing company where that allows us to grow internal talent, but also recruit and bring in new skills and capabilities. And inclusion and diversity is a key part of that. So collectively, the AstraZeneca kind of culture and climate is conducive to innovation and driving this forward. I'm a real champion for and exponent of collaboration. I've been part of a number of these collaborations for time. I've been part of initiating them, standing them up. So talking about them very briefly, CMAC, Continuous Manufacturing Crystallisation, based out of the University of Strathclyde, has allowed us to really work with other industrial partners to drive some of the science in continuous manufacturing crystallisation. With Made Smarter, I think again was mentioned yesterday, so CMAC funding predominantly from EPSRC, DM Squared, again UKRI, Innovate UK funding, but is this digital medicines manufacturing, and effectively part of the Made Smarter programme, so really looking at digitalisation of medicines development. Some really nice concepts coming out of that. Data factories, so rather than talking about labs, let's talk about data factories. This is where we generate data. Let's do that in a really smart way to support our development. Supplier relationships, it's a slide from Siemens, but it could be a number of suppliers. So really importantly, connecting with our suppliers, co-creating, co-developing. The more we can do that, I think, again, and a major part there is going to be standards and standardisation. So again, something I'm really interested in is, if we're talking about plug and play and modularity and flexibility, we don't want to have 20 different ports to have to plug into. Okay, so standardisation, absolutely key, a really challenging topic. And then finally, in the bottom corner, Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, again just over the boundary of Glasgow Airport. Funding from the UK government to set up an innovation centre, real opportunity. I think we're still working out how best to use it, but really a great opportunity to become this co-creative centre. So, to summarise, thank you for bearing with me on that one. So, healthcare is changing significantly in terms of the complexity of the medicines, in terms of the speed with which they need to be delivered, in terms of the complexity of our supply chains, but that transformation, transformation medicines manufacturing critical. The new manufacturing technology, it isn't just about technology, it has to be the symbiotic relationship that I mentioned with digital, and through that we can deliver benefits to society, patients and planet. In AstraZeneca, we're focused very much on that end-to-end picture, clinical to commercial, and really being able to replicate and map between the two. And finally, technology is just part of the change, and actually probably is the simplest part of the change. The culture, the skills, the business processes that need to wrap around that to make it happen are potentially the things that really block change happening, rather than the logical and scientific bit that says this works. Okay. Just want to acknowledge many, many people on this slide. So it's certainly great to be able to present all this superb work, but it's done by a number of people across the organisation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thanks, JP. Really interesting talk there. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, thank you. Well, very interesting talk, JP. Really like it. More of a comment and then a small question at the end. It's interesting to see that manufacturing technology is brought in-house again at large pharma, because it's an enabling part of your delivering process. But I think it needs also to be within the CDMO industry by two reasons. And I'm from Ovion, and we are very proud of being one of the most innovative CDMOs. But I think it needs to go almost in parallel.
Yes.
Because you will need probably the peace of mind of dual supply chain. So you'll need a reliable partner that can make up for unexpected volumes or surges. And then innovation also comes from a lot of smaller pharma, small biotechs that do not have access to this technology. And we are doing a very similar path in terms of oral dosage forms. But I was very intrigued to see the path that you are doing in continuous flow, because we look at it and we thought it was so difficult to create a platform from it. As you mentioned, every chemistry is different. The other thing was that even in continuous, you need different scales. You have products that you might sell 5 kilos per year and in commercial, and others 5,000 kilos, and the same unit will not give you that range of offering. So my question is, as you develop your pilot plant and you are planning to do it in Ireland, commercial facility, and you are targeting, if I understood well, to meet 50% of your needs in this technology, how are you doing it in terms of scales? And how are you driving the change? Is it from the R&D into tech ops? Are you bringing tech ops as well? How is the change management being done? Because we found it to be extremely difficult.
Yes, it's extremely difficult. So firstly that, and also to reinforce that, this is absolutely, this isn't replacing our third-party supply. It's very much a joined-up strategy, and I think increasingly that partnership is going to be really important, particularly if we're looking at common platforms and still trying to create that simplification of easy tech transfers and actually simplifying that route. It is R&D led predominantly, and whether that's from the API perspective, so either new molecules coming through that we'll develop, or second generation processes. And there are some processes where second gen is absolutely critical, and what we see, again going back to the acceleration point, is we see things move, get to market, we can do something, but actually we really have to think about the process. So they give us an opportunity. So second gen is needed, and then why not try and introduce the continuous. We're also very focused on introducing continuous in pre-registered starting materials, and that's probably again been our kind of easy win. It's kind of going further up, but this is really focused on registered stages. And the commercialization facility is very focused on effectively that commercialization phase. So very early commercial volumes of low volume, high value products. So in many cases, we're seeing that the same scale of equipment that we're using in technical is suitable for manufacturing commercial for those early years. I think the bit we're starting to look at now is what happens then. Yeah, so is it a case of us still being able to supply, and just to give you, as I say, a feel, you know, some of our oncology products, you're looking at somewhere between 500 kilos per year and 2.5 tons, so 2,500 kilos. So in that early period, so we can effectively flex that commercial facility to that commercialization facility to deliver that. But you say once you then get into sort of higher elements of growth curve, we're going to start to look at something different, and it may well mean, as you say, having multiple suppliers.
I can catch you afterwards, JP. It was, I mean, it's a really quick question about you say reading the signals from early phase clinical trials.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that sort of universally, or are there a specific type of active or application that it's most relevant to?
I would say it's across the oncology portfolio. Every single oncology program has an accelerated arm to it, you know, an area where the mechanism is understood and they're kind of pushing it back. The emerging areas are going into much more challenging targets within respiratory, where again we're starting to see opportunities to be more precision based in our treatments. So don't ask me about mechanisms. They kind of go in one ear and out the other. But in terms of broad therapy areas, that's kind of where we are.
Brilliant, thank you.